I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Welcome and thank you for joining today. I am Stephen Garner, and I'm a John Maxwell certified coach, speaker, and trainer. And I'm passionate about helping people live their best life. And today I'm honored to have my friend, Keturah Jenkins. It is a pleasure to have you, Keturah.
Thank you, man. I've been looking forward to this. I cannot wait.
And Keturah, you and I both share the same passion, the same dream of helping people live their best life. And I think it's also a great thing that is Women's History Month. We're honoring great women like yourself. And so that's something very near and dear to my heart because I was raised by women. My father wasn't in my life. And so, I really take great pride in having an intelligent woman like yourself on my show today. I just want to share with the audience your background and all the great things that you have done to date and continuing to do in your professional journey. Keturah Jenkins is an author, and I love hearing that too because you have written a great book, and we're going to talk about that later. You are an author, a certified professional coach with 20 years of experience working in 100 corporate America, Fortune 100 companies, ranging from information technology to quality to learning and development. Your capacities as a leader and mentor and executive facilitator are exceptional. I mean, when I was reading your bio, I thought it was awesome that you spoke on 4 different continents, facilitating and coaching and helping people to be their best self. That's fabulous. And one of the things I must say, that's not a part of the professional journey is you love playing games. And so I enjoy with my wife being in your home with your children and having those competitive sessions. They're just so great. So I had to add that into the mix.
Listen, I don't stay up for much, but I will stay up for a good game.
Yeah, we'll stay up for a good game.
Right.
And so, our purpose in talking tonight is really to help people to get unstuck, to help them to understand what does it take to be their best self, to get their life moving again. And sometimes you may have a good life, but it's not great. And so today we want to speak to that. And, as we look around the world, it's turned upside down. A lot of people's lives are just not great right now. So we want to think about that. And then we also want to think about, what does it take to help you to live your best life? Now, you wrote a book. I have to mention this. And this is a great book. And I want to encourage those of you, once we are finished, to go check out our book. But it's Whose Life Is This Anyway? Okay, which I think is awesome because it's all about writing an amazing story to help you to get going, to get your life in the right direction. I'm going to let you speak a little bit more about that as we get into it. But Keturah, let's kind of just talk about this. First of all, let's start with why did you write the book? Because you had a pretty good life, but you wrote a book, you became a coach. Let's talk a little bit about that to help people to understand more about you.
Yeah, no, I love the question because you're right. So there was nothing particularly wrong with life. What I'll tell people usually is if someone was asking me how you're doing, like you asked me how you're doing and we're pretty cool, I would say I'm doing about a 6.5, which meant like on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm not 10, but I'm not 3. There's nothing wrong. I love my husband. He's amazing. I love my kids. My kids are very healthy. I like my job, but it's just like nothing was, I wasn't quite excited about anything. And that's why I love this whole concept, because this is not about like everything is doom and gloom. In fact, we have a tendency to kind of paint things either they're amazing or they're bad, but usually it's some kind of nuance in the middle. And so what I started doing, Steve, is I started sitting down and asking myself questions that I would typically ask people that I coach. And just to try to get myself to try to understand, man, what's this thing? Why am I stuck at the 6.5? And so I wrote that stuff down, and I happened to send it to a friend of mine, and she was like, "This is amazing." She was like, "Where did you find it?" And I was like, "No, I just kind of was thinking through things." And she's like, "You got to write it down." So I did. I wrote it down, and as kind of a birthday gift to myself, the year I was turning 40, I published the book to say, like, you know what, this is something that was super helpful for me. And there are a lot of people out there who cannot afford coaches. So I wanted this to be like coaching, even if you've never heard of coaching, even if I wanted to feel more like you were sitting down with a trusted friend to just kind of help you think of things that are sometimes can be big and hairy, but in more of just an easy way. Like, make it fun. It doesn't have to be stressful. It can be fun figuring out what you want your story to be.
So you wrote the book at a time in your life, well, when it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. You wanted your life to be much better.
Yeah.
And you really wanted to do something that would transform where you were. And that's a lot of people right now. Some people are in a position where they may have a great paying job, but they hate their job.
Yeah.
They may be in a, at a good company, but they hate what they're doing. And
And
so
listen,
that's
I'm sorry. You spend too much time at work to hate what you do. Like,
right.
that's just gonna be, it's gonna kill your vibe. And that's why, sometimes I'll call an office and the person answering the phone is rude. And I almost want to say, didn't you interview for this job? Like, this should be something that you enjoy doing, because we give so much of our time. And I think of, like, when my kids were small, I'm leaving my children to go do something I hate. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So for me, it's around, finding your story, whether that be your professional story, whether that be your personal story, or either one.
Yes. So let's get into that, because let's talk about what does it take to get unstuck, and that's
Hmm.
where we want to start. Okay. So you write in your book the importance of story, and the subtitle of your book is making your life your amazing story, making your life your story. So why is it important to write a story? And that's what I really want to focus on. Why is that so significant to help you to get your life unstuck?
Yeah. So let me tell you, I heard this quote while I was kind of in that 6.5 life. And it was talking about marriage particularly, but it doesn't matter if you're married or not. And the quote was, when you choose a spouse, you choose a story. And I thought that was fascinating because, as you choose your spouse, right, that really writes the kind of story you're going to have. And then I started thinking, it's not just that decision. Every decision you make, you're actually writing your story every day. Like, I'm writing the story of somebody who, is going to work consistently, or I'm writing the story of somebody who's, slacking off and not doing their commitments. And to me, that was empowering, because that means no matter where I am, if I'm writing my story, I can also revise my story. So if it's not working for me, then I can change it.
Right. Do
Yeah.
you,
And so many times it's like we think we're just kind of stuck places, and we're not stuck at all. So that's why I love that whole concept of that your life is truly your story. And guess what? You are the one writing it every day.
and that's important. So do you think that people can take control of their situation if they looked at their life as a story, like a beginning, middle, and end? Do you feel like it'll give people greater control if they saw their life as this success narrative? What are your thoughts on that? Because I know people who say, you know what, I just can't get my life going. I'm not happy. And it's almost like they're telling themselves they're going to fail. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think about when you think of your story or your life as this narrative. So I like it to think of it, you can think of it middle, beginning, middle, and end. I like to think of it in chapters, right? Because so I'm a big reader, as you can see. I have bookshelves all over my house, bookshelves behind me. And when you're reading a story, you never really know what's going to happen in the next chapter. Like, the author can do something completely different. You can switch
Right.
characters. You can So it's one chapter at a time. Too many times we think that because I'm in chapter 1, chapter 10 is already written, but it's not. And so when I think about this kind of your life as this narration, I think of it as more in terms of, like, as I'm making decisions, when your decisions and what you're writing is no longer working for you, make a different decision.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's I hate to say it that way because people are like, man, is it that easy? It is really that easy. If this is, I'll give you an example, Steve. I like my sleep. I talked about it when we were talking about the games, right? And not only do I like my sleep, Steve, I need my sleep. So in order for me to function well, I need to go to bed at 10 o'clock. That's just how life works. Now, Steve asked me, do I go to bed at 10 o'clock every day? No. And then I wake up cranky, right? But if when cranky becomes not being cranky becomes more important, then I'll go to bed. I'll just make a different decision. But it's all in my power. No one's keeping me up at night. And so many times in our lives, it's the decisions are like that. It's us deciding what's more important, being revived in the morning or scrolling on my phone doing random stuff.
You know, one of the things that's important to understand, like you have the power to make a decision. But what do you say to those people who have not formed the habit of making decisions that will change your life? I mean, I like how you state in your book, you said, you know, you compared habits that are no longer working for you to like clothes that you outgrow. And you say sometimes those habits get in the way. So a person may want to do better, but they have habits that are in their way. What do you say to that person who is trying to like form that better habit, trying to change, you know, their routine so that, you know, they can execute on those decisions, so to speak?
Yeah. So first of all, I'd say first you have to acknowledge that that habit's not working for you anymore. So, and I'll give you another story. So I have two children. And after I had my second child, you know, I'm going back to the clothes. Those clothes did not look good on me anymore, Steve.
Right.
Like it just didn't. But I used to have a designer I shopped at, but it was no longer complimenting me. And until I got to the point where I said, you know what? The clothes haven't changed. I have changed. And I then had to go look and see what works for me now. But until I acknowledged that, I kept buying. I would just try to buy it in a different size. Okay, I would try to buy it, you know, let me try a different color, but it wasn't working because I had changed. Once I acknowledged that this thing is not working, then I went and found other things that worked great. So the first thing I would say is trying to figure out which of those habits have you outgrown, or has your life outgrown. And it's not even to say that they are quintessentially bad. It's
right.
just
They're not bad.
Yeah, they're not bad. That designer is still amazing. It's just not amazing for what I got going on.
Right. Right.
So one, you got to acknowledge once ones are bad. And then I like to give the analogy of a GPS, right? In order for a GPS to work, you have to first know where you are, and you have to know where you're going, right? If you don't have those two things, no matter how sophisticated this technology is, it's not going to work. So to know where you are, you got to figure out which of these habits work and don't work. But then you have to know where you're going to figure out which habits are going to be worth it to get through the pain of making it a habit. Because if I don't know where I'm going, then it's going to be like, why am I going to go to bed at 10 o'clock? Because it's not getting me anywhere. It's not getting me to anything closer. But at the point where I'm like, oh, because it's getting me to that thing right there. So as an example, when I have early meetings, you better believe I'm in bed on time because I want to wake up fresh, right? Because what I'm trying to get to is worth me putting that habit into place. So you got to have those two things, Steve.
You bring up a good point. That's why I think self-reflection is so important. Introspection is so important every day. You know, one of the habits I have is to reflect on my day, to look back at how my day went. What did I do? And I look at not just the bad things, but the good things, right? Because I'm taking in inventory. Because to your point, you know, we're trying to get to a certain place, right? And, you know, as you know, in coaching, you know, you first have to become self-aware. If you're not self-aware, if you don't know yourself, you can't grow yourself. And then you have to be responsible for your actions. But self-reflection is so important. And I think, you know, when we look at our lives today, we have so many things distracting us, right? Yeah. You know, we got our gadgets. Oh, by the way, we got good distractions and bad distractions, right? And I'm not even talking about, for people like you and me, I'm not even talking, we don't really have, I could say safely, we probably don't have bad distractions. We have good distractions. like like people who want our time, who
Yeah.
are not bad people, but they want us to do all these other things.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Fair. Fair.
I know I'm type A and I want to say yes to everything. I want to do everything. I have all these great ideas that I want to execute. You know, so I got to ask you this question though, because I know that is true for a lot of people. You know,
Yeah.
how do you overcome the distractions? I mean, that is something that I think many of us underestimate because they stack up, right? You
Oh
get
yeah.
text messages, you have friends, you have things, you have projects you want to do. How do you overcome the distractions from your perspective?
Yeah. So for me, you know, so I'll deviate a little bit because any distraction is a bad distraction. If it's not getting you closer to where you're going, it doesn't even matter. Like there's no judgment call. It's not getting you where you're going. So, and what I'd say in terms of getting over these distractions, to me, it's always the call. One of my favorite quotes, you'll probably hear a lot. I like quotes. Is when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else.
Yes, right.
So every time you say yes to something, you have to start understanding, what am I saying no to? And am I okay with that trade off? Because if I'm okay with the trade off, then peace, it's fine. But a lot of times we don't ask ourselves if we're okay with the trade off. And when you don't ask that question, you can't be intentional about your choices. So again, when that distraction comes, it's now a question of, okay, if I say yes that I'm going to help this person, that means, this presentation I'm prepping for, I'm going to be a day behind. Am I okay with that? Do I feel comfortable enough with the content? Or if you're not okay with it, guess what? Make a different decision. So again, it's all basically what you want to do in making those decisions. I think we've lost Steve. Oh no. But we'll keep going until he joins us again. But so if you think about whether it's distractions or whether it's anything that's coming up, it doesn't really matter. What matters most is, am I deciding where to spend my time, or I'm allowing someone else to decide? And they're not going to make the same decisions as me because they don't have the same goals that they're going towards.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm looking at some of the comments. With every decision, Michael says, we are writing our story. I mean, that is so important to understand. We are writing our story, so we need to really keep that in mind. Hey, Bob, Ken, good to see you. Thank you. So what do you say is the biggest thing that a person needs to start doing today in order to get on track to start writing their story?
Yeah, so I'll go back to that GPS analogy. You have got to absolutely understand where you are today. And understand where you are today, but understand it in a holistic way. So a lot of times when you ask people how they are, like I said, either everything is amazing or everything is horrible. But really, there usually is both in them. So I encourage people to say, you know what, wherever you are, write out what are some things that you love about where you are. Because even people who are in sometimes a bad place, there are things about it that are positive. So capture that stuff. So that's the first thing. And then also capture, what are some things that you would change about your story? So what are some things that you think, man, I think in the book I call them a sticky situation. Like, what are some situations where it's like, I don't like this? Because if you're capturing it holistically of where you are, then that really kind of helps you figure it out. Once you do that, then I have a friend of mine who she has this quote where she would ask people, what makes you ridiculously proud? And I love that question, Steve, because if I asked you what would, if you did next year would make you ridiculously proud, like you automatically start lighting up, right? Because
Right.
it's not just like, oh, this is cool. No, what's gonna make you like do a little dance, even if it's behind closed doors, because you're excited you did it. That starts to help you figure out what your destination is.
Yes.
And that destination sometimes doesn't mean you have to completely change your life. Because guess what? I didn't transform my life necessarily, but it was how I looked at things a bit differently to figure out what are the things that I needed in order to get me to kind of this 10. So I would say those are the two things that you've got to do. You got to figure out where you are holistically and make that list of what would make you ridiculously proud. And also don't make it for like 10 years out. Like what would make you ridiculously proud if you could do it in the next 6 months? And
Yes.
let's start there.
Yeah.
Because, sometimes it's about making those micro habits instead of just looking for this. Well, I want to make $1 million tomorrow. I mean, okay, that's great, but how can we how can we ladder up?
That's a lot of us, right?
Right.
We got a comment. What would you say to someone who has some trepidation about making that revision? So that's fear is a big deal. I mean, right?
Yeah, no, fear is a big deal. So what typically when I'm dealing with folks that I'm coaching and they have that reservation, what I try to get them to do is name that fear, because fear, until it is spoken, is often bigger than it is. So when you start to name it, then you can start to say, okay, here are the fears that I have. What things can I put in place to keep myself safe from these fears? Because, okay, I have a fear of, some people may say, well, man, I have a fear of failing. Okay, great. Let's talk about this fear of failing. What would happen if you failed? Okay, well,
Right.
if I failed, this thing would happen. Okay, well, if that thing happened, what bad thing would happen? And so either they discover two things. It's usually they discover one or two things, Steve. Either they discover that, you know what, the worst case scenario is not that bad. Or
Right.
secondly, they discover of the really bad things, they can put mitigations in place in order to protect against it. But until you name that fear, Steve, or you name the fear about the revision, you'll just say, I'm stuck in my story. And again, as long as I almost named my company about something about being intentional, because my whole thing is be intentional about your revision. So it's
Yeah.
not so much I'm telling you everyone has to make a revision. I'm just saying be intentional to say, okay, I'm ready for a revision because this thing is not working, or I'm good right now. Then if you're good right now, don't complain and you're not a 6.5 then.
Right. So, I think it's also important to, as you said, name the fear, but also name the success. So that means that words and pictures come into play. I think words are silent thoughts, but pictures actually create the life that you want to live when you see that. I think we need to talk a little bit more about that, like the importance of words and self-talk. We have two voices. We have that inner coach and that inner critic. And sometimes we listen to that inner critic too much and we don't listen to that inner coach. But I think we need to dwell on the importance of words and how they help you to create that picture so that you can live your story. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, you wrote about this in the book and I thought it was really well stated that you have to have those words and then create that picture. Just to share a few nuggets on that.
Yeah, no. So yes, I completely agree with you. The things that you say to yourself are so critically important, because what you're saying to yourself is just kind of reinforcing it, and either is what's going to be making it easier for you to adjust your story, or for you to kind of defeat yourself even before you get there. So absolutely, your words are important. And what I would say about the pictures, when I usually ask people to kind of figure out what that future looks like, I ask them to draw it in vivid detail, right? So I want to know, down to what, when you're jumping for joy at that thing, what do you have on? Like, I want to know at that level of detail, because when we start to picture things that vividly, then it feels real. It feels tangible now. It doesn't feel something just kind of out there. So pictures are super important. Also, when you think of pictures, like, what are you keeping before you? Are you keeping this picture of success before you and what success means? Or are you keeping these visions of failure in front of you? Like, what are you keeping in front of you?
That's right, because you're going to live out what you see, what you
Yeah.
speak. You're going to act out those very things that you're telling yourself. My wife asked me to remind us to give the title of the book that Couture wrote, which is a great book to get your life started. Whose life is this anyway? Making your life your story. So That's really important. Now, I do want to speak to the individuals who have delayed their dream. And, they say that in life, there are two pains in life. There's the pain of regret and the pain of hard work. And it's so
Mm.
sad, I have visited people who were, um, you know, in a hospital or retirement home. And I've listened to individuals who confess, like, hey, you know what? I didn't live my dream. There are a couple of questions I want to speak to and answer. Uh, first of all, is it too late? Number one, is it too late? I got to bring up that age question. Is it too late
I
to
know.
start right now?
I'm jumping on it. You want me to wait to the second question, or you want me to answer now?
Because
So
let's talk
listen,
about that for a second.
it is not too late. There's so many. Okay, so I had this guy who was on my team. I love stories, so I always have a story for everything. This guy on my team, and he was building a boat. And he had this apparently, if you're a boat builder, you can buy a plan that takes 5 years to build this boat. And he was saying that somebody was like, well, 5 years is too long. And he said, well, listen, 5 years is going to pass regardless. Either I'll have a boat at the end of the 5 years or I won't have anything.
Right.
That to me stuck. I heard that story. He told me that about 15 years ago. The second one is they say the best time to have planted an apple tree is 5 years ago, but the second best time is today. Right. So the thing is, while there are some dreams that, sure, it may have been more convenient or to do it at a certain other time, but it's never too late. The thing is sometimes our dreams also don't tend to grow with us. So
Right.
if your dream is still a dream that only a 20-year-old has, it's not going to feel right on a 40-year-old because it's a dream from the perspective of a 20-year-old. But so, like, as you think about your dream, what does that dream look like in the reality of where you are right now? And it can still be a beautiful dream, even if it looks a bit different than the original, because now, like those clothes, it fits me where I am right now. So I encourage people, it's not about giving up on your dream. It's about figuring out what if that dream feels authentic to who I am right now, and how do I start living it today?
Yeah. So it's never too late. And then the other thing is you can make adjustments at different stages of your life. You have different gifts. I mean, if you're older, and this is what I love about senior citizens, by the way, is I can go to them and shorten the time it would take for me to learn something. I can decrease my educational process because I go to a senior citizen who's already lived or who's already walked those paths that I'm trying to journey and get so much rich information from them. And so at different stages of your life, it's important to note that you're going to gain a certain amount of wisdom. And so you can do things differently. By the same token, when you're younger, you have energy, you have more time to make mistakes, to recover from the mistakes. And then going back to your your comment about fear is that, you shouldn't be afraid when you're younger. You have more time to make mistakes because you have more time to recover, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why I'm not so hard. That's why I'm not so hard on my daughter. When she breaks something or she experiments with something, from my perspective, I'm like, great. Try new things, do different things, right?
Learn now. Yes.
Learn now, right?
Yes.
So I think,
Absolutely. And that's why it's all about perspective, right? So sometimes we unfortunately put something on us that's not necessary. So we say like, well, my dream had to have looked like this by X time, or I
right,
can't
yeah,
have it anymore. I mean, Steve, listen, you knew me, we've known each other a long time. My intention was to have children when I was 25. Now
oh,
that didn't happen, right?
right.
But so what was I going to give up on my, like, okay, well, since it didn't happen at 25, I'm not going to have any. No, I mean, that sounds ridiculous, right? But sometimes we give up on dreams prematurely just because we think the window has passed, when really it's about that self-reflection and figure out, this dream was more about achieving this thing. How can I still do that even if it looks different?
It looks different, right? And different is not bad. What it is more about making the adjustments, being creative on the path. And sometimes some of those difficulties and adversities that we encounter actually triggers that creativity that would not be unlocked unless we had that difficult thing. I mean, like, you wrote a book, right? Why did you write the book? I mean, your life was good, so you said, but I want it to be greater. So I think sometimes, we also need to embrace, the challenges, even though life is not going in that linear path. You know how it is. You go to school, you get your degree, and you get your resume ready, and you say, I want to get these jobs. I often look at, I have a book that has all my rejection letters. I mean, it's a stack of rejection letters. And I've read all those letters, and I just saw it the other day, and I said to myself, things did not go the way that I wanted them to. But that's great, because perhaps the way that I wanted them to go would not have brought me to this point of greatness in my life, right?
Listen, this is why we're kindred spirits. Let me tell you what I did. It must have been last week. So I went and wrote down every point in my career where a no ended up for my good. There were jobs that I interviewed for and I didn't get, and the people were almost apologetic. Like, they didn't even know why they didn't hire me. Like they were like, "We love you, but it's like they don't know. Come back." And in every time I've been able to look back and be like, man, that was I'm glad that did not happen.
Right. Right. You're glad it didn't happen, right?
Right. But at the time I was invested, right? And I remember this, one person, and she was like, well, maybe you can grow into the role. And in my heart, I'm like, I could do this role with my eyes closed. And I'm going in like, it's because I look too young and they don't, but I'm so glad I didn't get that job, Steve. But, a lot of times when we have the ability to reflect and we can see that also gives us the courage when we're moving forward to say, you know what, if saying no right now is not the same thing as saying no. Yes. And some people confuse the two, because no right now, that's just saying I'm intentionally making a different decision. At one point in my career, I went from having a team to going back to being an individual contributor. And everyone told me, you're crazy because you're on this leadership track. And for me, it was no right now, because I was passionate about leadership development. I didn't have any experience in it. And when I tell you the things that I was able to do in that capacity, where on paper it looked like I had taken a step down, was amazing. That's when I traveled around the world teaching people. That's when I had the capacity to write the book. That's when
I gotta say something to you about that. So that's a good, like I told you, I'm big on seeing women do great things because I was raised by women. Father wasn't in my life, especially for young ladies too. Okay, you didn't necessarily write, I'm going to be on 4 continents speaking and coaching people, but because you pursued your greatness, you pursued your desires, you achieve greater things in the process. That's the key thing. You kept persevering. You didn't give up. You didn't stop. You made the adjustments. You need to speak to a little bit about that, because that's really important. I mean, we look at people and we see how awesome they are, but we forget what it took to get there, or we don't know what it took to get there. You should speak to that a little bit, so to encourage especially younger women who are trying to achieve great things. And right now they're not where they want to be.
Yeah, no, I love that segue, Steve. So I told you I took that job in learning, and I went from having a team of like 40 people down to like, I'm doing the work. And after you've led for a while, you're not used to doing the work. So I'm doing the work. But I was able, what I knew, Steve, is that I was trying to learn and understand something. So it was worth it. And it was worth then some of the things that I was doing where before I would have had someone on my team doing it. It was worth it. And how these opportunities came for me to speak, literally, they were not paying me to speak. Like, that was not in my job description. But one day they came to me and was like, hey, we need you to facilitate this meeting. And in my mind, Steve, honestly, I was like, did they run out of other people? Like what? Because I was in an organization of people who had PhDs in learning and development. So I was like, wow. So someone recognized something in me and gave me that opportunity, and I ran with it. And even though I could have seen it as a point of frustration because they didn't give me more opportunities, every time they gave an opportunity, I just did my best. And then it started, more and more people would figure it out. And even at my current job now, I came there and someone heard me speak at a conference, and now they advertise for me. Like I speak at conferences, but it's because someone's like, hey, you got to see her speak. But when you stand in what you do well and you're committed to doing it well, people will notice. And whether that noticing takes a year or 5 years or whatever, it's still worth it, because while I'm doing it, I'm still growing, I'm still progressing. So it's not about, a lot of times, that destination. It's also about what you're learning on the journey. The last thing I'll say, my last job, I was ready to leave there, Steve, 3 years before I left. 3 years. Like, I just knew I was ready to go. But in those 3 years, I picked up 2 more continents I taught on. I picked up this course, that my favorite course, it's a female leadership course that's amazing, self-reflection. I got an opportunity to teach that a number of times. So when I thought it was time to move on, that opportunity didn't present itself. And so then I had this opportunity to add to my resume in ways that I would only have dreamt of. So sometimes we also have to be open to things showing up differently than we imagine them to be packaged. And just because it doesn't show up in the color wrapping paper I thought, I'm going to say no.
Yes. So that's a good point. Be deliberate about writing your story, but also expect things to happen in ways that may be unpredictable, that may not look the way you thought it should look. But that doesn't mean that it's over. It's the end. It's the beginning of many opportunities. Before we close, I just want to summarize some of the key points we hit today that I thought they were just really great. First thing, you want to be deliberate and intentional about writing your story. You have to start. Okay. Second thing, you got to make that. Well, you should make that decision. Then the second thing you need to do is start to form that habit. Really looking at the habits that you have, and those habits that are not helping you to get to where you want to be. You need to change those habits. Don't be afraid. Someone asked, what if I'm, fearful, intrepid? Don't be afraid. Act on it. Speak to yourself. Say things that will help you to overcome that fear, but also speak to your success to create those word pictures. What else would you say? You see, I was listening to you. Look, I didn't write any notes there. I was listening to you.
I'm impressed. That was awesome. I would say just feel empowered, right? Like, feel it like this is your story. And not only are you writing this story for you, which is interesting and powerful, you're also writing the story that others are observing. And we never know how our story either inspires others or makes them think that, hey, man, this is something that I could do. And you never know. And I think there are times that we glorify certain stories over others where, okay, my story has to look a certain way to get glory. But the beautiful thing about it is, your story is specific to you. So as long as, you're living in your story, it can be fulfilling, even if it doesn't look like somebody else's story. So that's what I leave folks with, because listen, you want to be miserable, chase somebody else's story, because you're going to do all that work. You're going to get there and it's not going to be fulfilling.
Don't compare yourself to others. That's a really good point. Well, listen, I want to thank you for joining me today. This was a good conversation, one of many conversations. We'll continue this. I also want to remind our audience to, buy your book, Whose Life Is This Anyway?
Look, it's that. Wait, there you go.
Life story. Yes, there you go. And where can you buy the book? Is listed on Amazon?
Yep, absolutely listed on Amazon. But in general, to kind of connect with me, you can head to my website, which is www.yourstory.net. And then there you can look at where places to buy the book, kind of connect with me. Also, there is one thing we didn't talk about. A lot of people, when they're trying to revise their story, it's around their career. So there is a printable on there when people are trying to get coaches a lot of times around their career. So there's a free printable on there in terms of how do you think about your career. I encourage you to grab that as well. So whether you want to kind of buy the book, connect with me for coaching, etc., all of that stuff is available on the site.
Yes, I would encourage you to check out my dear friend and sister Keturah. Listen, take your cues from Couture and live a great life. And until next time, we'll do this again, Couture. I mean, we got so many other things to talk about. But I want to thank our audience today, and you guys have a great rest of the evening or day. Thank you.
Absolutely.